Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Larson. The COVID intervention that by far had the least amount of scientific attention is mask wearing. It's one of those things that is sort of most universally applied, but as we'll remember at the beginning, there was some definite flip-flopping that was happening. And this is justified. Remember at the beginning, there's even that 60 Minutes interview where Dr. Fauci was being interviewed, and he almost laughed off. You can look it up on YouTube. They almost sort of laughed off, people wearing a mask, and that it's totally unnecessary. And what I think he was really kind of responding to was studies that were done well before COVID on other respiratory type viruses like influenza. And there's plenty of studies that show that mask wearing is just really, really ineffective to stop the spread of a respiratory based virus. And so I really think that's what the comment was about. But obviously, through some statistical gymnastics, some studies, some really, really poorly done studies showed that, okay, maybe there's some efficacy. However, when it comes to scientific papers, really the ones that are kind of the gold standard are randomized clinical trials, RCTs. And to my knowledge, there's only been 2 RCTs done on masks, one in Denmark and one in Bangladesh. And the one in Bangladesh was the more robust study, at least from a population sort of standpoint. There was hundreds of thousands of people that were enrolled in the study. And you can certainly look at the study and read it for yourself. But it basically comes down to this, is that the mask wearing was not helpful. It was powered to include lots of people. So it's the results, I think, are sound. There are some other general issues with the study. Like, for example, you don't know, you would know if you're in the mask group or in the control group because they're wearing a mask. So it's not like there was a double-blind, sort of group where you didn't know if you were part of the intervention or not part of the intervention, because a mask is pretty obviously that you're part of the intervention group. But with as many people that was in the test, it was a good study from that regard to really show basically the efficacy, and the efficacy was very, very poor. And then it begs the question, okay, well, what about for kids? Because now as some policies, even one of the more strict kind of mask mandate states like California, the state that I'm in, that the indoor mask mandate for adults in, kind of public places, going to the store, etc., has been lifted. That's no longer mandated. But for kids in school, the mandate persists. So what's up with that? Now the norm is no masking indoor. So for kids to still be wearing masks indoors, that is now against the norm. And so that policy has to be absolutely validated scientifically. We need to pressure our schools and district and state to really answer the question beyond a shadow of doubt, incontrovertibly, that this is absolutely necessary. Because now, since it's against the norm, the burden of proof is on those who suggest that this is still an important and absolutely necessary thing to do. And if you look at the 2 randomized clinical trials, kids aren't even included in the study in Bangladesh, the more robust study. They're just not a part of it. So there's no scientific validation. If we go back and look at, sort of the science from before, and, read articles of people, scientists that have looked into this and looked at all the studies. I think the Brownstone Institute is a good website to check out. They've got a whole section on masks, and there's some really great, very thoughtful articles that have really dug into all these studies. And it's very clear that there's just no efficacy, and certainly no efficacy for kids. And this is besides all the kind of downstream issues that happen with long-term mask wearing for kids. There're just so many. I don't want to go into that too much right now. I just want to kind of stick to one point, that the indoor mandate has been lifted, except for kids in schools. And the burden of proof is on those that think that that is still a necessary thing for kids. Because, the policy in general, anytime an intervention is suggested, there also needs to be a description, an understanding of the endpoint of that intervention. And do you know the endpoint? Have you been informed about what is the endpoint? At what point is this mask mandate supposed to be lifted for kids? We don't know. It's just a totally arbitrary recommendation, certainly not backed in science. The science is super, super clear on that. And there's no endpoint. And so it's just a completely arbitrary suggestion. So it's incumbent upon us as parents, because kids don't know how to fight for themselves. There's some kids, fortunately, that are, trying to demonstrate their desire for, removing the mask. But this has to happen with the adults, right? Who are supposed to be thinking critically for ourselves and not just parroting information that, sort of politically appointed public health officials are telling us. So if we're thinking sort of critically and we're thinking logically, then we'd realize that this ongoing suggestion that kids should be wearing a mask in school is just logically inconsistent with the rest of the policies that are changing now over time. So that's the main point of the episode today, is that there's no reason that kids should be wearing a mask in school. And we need to speak to your local schools. You need to speak to your districts, and then finally the state, and put the pressure on all the people who think that this is necessary and demand some kind of proof that this is absolutely important and necessary to be ongoing. So I'll keep reading the studies and bringing you the information. Until then, keep it real.